stop what you are doing right now and allow the noise of the world to fall silent for just a moment. Because this interruption was not random, and this pause was not accidental. And the very fact that your eyes are moving across these words at this exact second is proof that something far greater than chance is at work. Something ancient, deliberate, and intentional. Something that was set in motion long before you ever took your first breath. And I need you to understand that this moment has weight, because eternity leaned into time to bring you here. And nothing about this encounter is ordinary or coincidental. And if you rush past it or treat it lightly, you may overlook the very shift you have been crying out for in the quiet places of your soul, because this second was written before the foundations of the earth were laid, and what is about to unfold carries the power to alter the direction of your life starting tonight. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now. And if you allow your attention to drift even slightly, you could miss the breakthrough that heaven has been preparing while you were waiting, praying, and wondering if anything was happening at all. So listen with your spirit and not just your ears, because your name has already been spoken beyond this realm, whispered in places you cannot see, acknowledged in realms you cannot access, and the unseen has been moving on your behalf, long before you became aware of it. And hosts beyond human understanding have been aligned for this precise moment. Because what is being released carries urgency, and what is being revealed cannot be delayed any longer. And this opening will not remain available forever, because there are moments that come once and never return in the same form. And this is one of them. And the stirring you felt that pulled you here was not curiosity. It was recognition. It was resonance. It was your spirit responding to a call that originated beyond logic. And the reason your heart quickened and your attention locked in was because something inside you already knew that this was not just another message passing through your awareness, but an appointment designed specifically for you. And I need you to understand that agreement matters, because faith responds before proof appears, and alignment happens before manifestation arrives. And when you act now, you are not helping content. You are positioning yourself. You are saying yes before details are explained. You are stepping into alignment before the outcome is visible. And this is how heaven responds. Because I have seen you in ways no one else ever has. I have witnessed the moments you thought were invisible. The tears that soaked your pillow when the world was asleep. The prayers you whispered under your breath when you felt foolish for hoping again. The exhaustion you carried while pretending you were fine. The strength you summoned when you felt like you had none left. And every time you felt abandoned, dismissed, or overlooked, you were never outside my sight, not for a second, because I was closer than your breath, holding you when you thought you were falling apart alone, strengthening you when you whispered that you could not continue, watching you fight battles you never told anyone about, observing the nights when anxiety kept you awake while your mind replayed every fear and every unanswered question. And you may have believed that this message appeared by chance among countless distractions. But there is no randomness here, because I orchestrated this intersection. I aligned the timing. I ensured that out of everything competing for your attention, this would find you. Because you are not forgotten and never have been. And the season of waiting that stretched you, tested you, and nearly convinced you to stop believing is ending now. Not because you earned it, but because the time has come. And I know the betrayals that cut deeper than words. I saw how trust was broken by those who should have protected it, how loyalty was exploited, how credit was stolen, how lies were spoken while you stayed silent, how abandonment came from the very people you would have defended without hesitation. And I watched you sit alone in the early hours of the morning, questioning your worth, wondering if your prayers were reaching beyond the ceiling, asking yourself if you mattered at all. And hear this clearly now, because I have never forgotten your name, not once, not ever, because I knew you before you were formed. I knew you before stars were placed in the sky. I knew you when creation was spoken into existence, and your name is etched into my hands, carried in my heart, present in my thoughts, and every sunrise reminds me of you. Every nightfall finds me watching over you, and there has never been a moment when you slipped from my awareness, because while you rested, I guarded. While you worked, I prepared. While you struggled, I fought. And even when loneliness felt overwhelming, you were never abandoned. And your obedience to share hope multiplies light beyond what you can see, because what you release does not end with you. And what you are about to hear now will expose the unseen conflict that has been unfolding while you thought nothing was happening, because resistance was not evidence of failure, it was confirmation of significance. And opposition came not because you were weak, but because you carried something powerful, something dangerous to darkness, something that threatened established structures. And the delays were not denials. They were battlegrounds, because the moment you step fully into who you were created to be, systems break, chains fall, and lives shift. And that is why pressure intensified when you got close. Why doors seemed to shut at the last second. Why discouragement came from unexpected directions. But understand this now, because the season has shifted. Resistance has expired. The path has been cleared. The window has opened. And what was held back is being released, because lies that shaped your thinking are being dismantled. False narratives that whispered failure are losing authority. And every word spoken against your destiny is being overturned, because you are not forgotten. You are not disqualified. You are not broken beyond use. You are not behind. You are not finished. You are not too late. And what was meant to stop you has become proof of your resilience. And restoration is not symbolic. Provision is not imaginary. Transformation is not theoretical, because tangible shifts are coming. Real opportunities, real resources, real connections, real healing, and the real alignment. And signs will begin to surface sooner than you expect. Confirmations stacking upon confirmations. Alignment replacing chaos. Clarity dissolving confusion, and doors opening without force. And what once required struggle will begin to flow, and provision will arrive through channels you did not anticipate, through opportunities you could not have planned, through favor you did not manufacture, because this is not coincidence, it is orchestration, and health is being restored in ways no diagnosis could explain. Strength returning where weakness lingered, balance replacing imbalance, vitality rising where fatigue once ruled, and relationships once considered lost will find resolution where appropriate, because not everything returns. But what is meant to continue will be refined, strengthened, and restored. And understand this clearly, because participation matters, faith is active, obedience moves heaven into motion, and alignment requires response, because what has been prepared must be received, and what has been opened must be entered, and what has been released must be embraced. And when you act now, you are not convincing heaven. You are agreeing with it, and timing matters, because delayed obedience delays manifestation, and faith responds before certainty arrives. Because the next days will carry markers, signals, and confirmations that will remind you of this moment, and the shift has already begun. Because this was never about hype, never about pressure, never about manipulation, but about alignment. And what happens next depends on how you respond now. Because the door stands open, the invitation has been extended, and the moment is alive, and your future is not behind you. It is unfolding. Your best days are not over. They are approaching. And what began in silence is about to echo in visible ways, because what was spoken has already been established, and now it moves into form. And this moment will be remembered as the turning point, the place where delay ended and movement began, where waiting gave way to manifestation, where hope shifted into evidence. Because you are seen, you are known, you are carried, you are protected, and what has been started will be completed. And this season does not close without fruit, and what you have endured was not wasted, because it refined you for what comes next. And this is your moment, this is your shift, this is your opening. And what follows will confirm what you felt when you arrived here, because nothing about this was accidental, and everything from this point forward begins to move. And as you continue to breathe into this moment, something subtle but undeniable is already rearranging itself within you. Because truth does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it enters like a quiet certainty that settles deep in your chest and refuses to leave. And that is what is happening now. Because what you are sensing is not emotion alone. It is alignment. It is recognition. It is the moment when something long dormant begins to awaken. And you may not yet have language for it, but your spirit understands exactly what is taking place. Because for so long you have lived under the weight of questions that had no answers, prayers that seemed to echo back in silence, effort that felt unseen, and faith that was tested beyond what you thought you could carry. Yet you are still here, still breathing, still hoping, still listening, and that alone tells a story of strength you never fully acknowledged. Because survival itself became your quiet testimony, and endurance shaped you in ways comfort never could. And now the pressure that once threatened to crush you has become the very force that forged you. Because what was sent to weaken you has refined you, and what tried to delay you has only positioned you more precisely. And the reason things could not move forward before was not because you were unworthy, but because timing matters in the unseen, and alignment must be exact for what is about to unfold. Because some doors cannot open until you are prepared to walk through them without shrinking, without apologizing, without doubting your right to be there. And you are reaching that place now, where you no longer need permission to step into what was always meant for you. And you are beginning to understand that the resistance you faced was not proof that you were wrong, but confirmation that you were carrying something valuable. Because opposition does not waste energy on what poses no threat, and the intensity of the fight was always proportional to the magnitude of what you hold. And this is why you felt targeted, misunderstood, isolated, because refinement often happens in solitude, and preparation rarely feels like progress while it is happening. But now the season turns, and the internal work begins to show externally, and the shifts that start within will soon reflect without. And what once felt delayed will begin to accelerate, and what felt stuck will begin to move, and clarity will replace confusion, not because everything becomes easy, but because you finally see with new eyes, and hear with new discernment, and choose with new authority. Because something has changed in you, even now as you read, because awareness itself carries power, and truth once recognized cannot be unseen. And from this moment forward, you will begin to notice patterns breaking, cycles losing grip, thoughts no longer holding the same weight, because lies lose strength when exposed, and fear loses power when named. And you are no longer the same person who entered this moment, because insight has shifted your posture, and alignment has recalibrated your direction. And the next steps will begin to appear not as overwhelming leaps, but as clear invitations, one after another, each requiring trust, each requiring movement, because stagnation is no longer an option, and retreat is no longer comfortable, and returning to who you were before this moment will feel impossible, because you have tasted something truer, something deeper, something more aligned with who you actually are. And from here forward, discernment sharpens, and distractions lose appeal. And what once drained, you will no longer have access to you, because boundaries will form naturally, not out of fear, but out of clarity. And you will begin to honor your energy, your time, your calling, because you finally recognize their value. And this recognition shifts everything, because what you tolerate determines what stays, and what you honor determines what grows. And you are stepping into a season where growth becomes inevitable, because you are no longer fighting yourself, and inner resistance dissolves, and alignment replaces striving, and movement replaces waiting. And you will begin to notice that opportunities find you more easily. Conversations open doors unexpectedly. Ideas come with momentum, and things that once required effort begin to flow with less resistance. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you are finally positioned correctly within it. And when you are aligned, effort multiplies instead of drains, and action produces fruit instead of frustration. And even challenges serve purpose instead of confusion, because you are no longer asking, "Why is this happening to me?" but "How is this shaping me?" And that shift alone changes outcomes, because perspective determines power, and you are reclaiming yours. And there will be moments soon where you pause and realize that something you once prayed desperately for has quietly arrived. Not in the dramatic form you imagined, but in a way that fits you perfectly. And you will smile because you will recognize it as confirmation. And there will be days when you look back at this moment and realize that this was the point where things began to turn, where clarity replaced doubt, where movement replaced stagnation, where belief replaced exhaustion. And you will understand that nothing was wasted, not the tears, not the waiting, not the struggle, because each part prepared you for what you can now sustain, and sustain you will, because you are stronger than you know, wiser than you realize, and more supported than you ever believed. And from here forward, trust will feel less like a risk and more like a response, and obedience will feel less like sacrifice and more like alignment, and faith will feel less like effort and more like agreement. Because you are no longer trying to force outcomes. You are cooperating with timing, and that is where peace lives. Not in certainty, but in alignment, and the days ahead will reveal what was once hidden. Not all at once, but step by step, because unfolding happens in layers, and growth is progressive, and what matters now is that you remain present, responsive, and willing, because the door has opened, but you must walk through it, and the path has cleared, but you must take the steps, and the invitation stands, but you must accept it, and as you do, momentum builds and confidence returns, and identity stabilizes, and you begin to move not from fear of loss, but from assurance of purpose. And that is where transformation becomes sustainable, because it is rooted, not rushed, And this is only the continuation, not the conclusion. Because what has begun will continue to unfold layer by layer, revelation by revelation, step by step, and the story is far from over. Because you are still becoming, still expanding, still aligning, and what lies ahead carries more depth, more clarity, and more fulfillment than what lies behind. And you will know that this moment mattered, because from here forward, you no longer move as someone waiting to be chosen, but as someone who has remembered who they are. And as this remembering settles deeper, you begin to notice that your inner world no longer feels fragmented the way it once did, because pieces that were scattered by disappointment, rejection, delay, and misunderstanding are quietly coming back into alignment. And this integration brings a calm strength that does not need to announce itself, a steadiness that does not depend on external validation, because you are no longer measuring your worth by outcomes or applause, but by truth. And truth has a way of stabilizing what was once shaken, because when identity is restored, confusion loses its grip, and when clarity arrives, fear no longer has room to negotiate, and you will begin to sense that decisions become easier, not because choices disappear, but because discernment sharpens, and you can feel when something is aligned and when it is not. And this discernment will save you time, energy, and heartache, because you will no longer chase what drains you or cling to what no longer belongs in your next chapter. And letting go will feel less like loss and more like relief, because you are no longer afraid that releasing the wrong thing will leave you empty. Since you now understand that alignment always replaces what it removes with something truer, something stronger, something more fitting. And this understanding changes how you move through life, because desperation dissolves, comparison fades, and urgency transforms into intentional momentum, and you will begin to move with purpose rather than pressure, because you are no longer trying to prove yourself. You are simply responding to what resonates. And this response carries power, because authenticity is magnetic, and when you move in alignment, the right people recognize you without effort, and the wrong ones naturally fall away without conflict. And this is not isolation, it is refinement, because expansion requires space, and growth demands clarity, and the season ahead will not be crowded with noise but curated by purpose, and you will notice that conversations deepen, connections feel more meaningful, and interactions begin to carry substance rather than performance. Because you are no longer seeking approval, you are seeking alignment, and that shift alone elevates every area of your life. Because when you stop trying to fit, you finally begin to belong. And belonging does not require explanation. It simply feels right. And this sense of rightness will guide you forward even when the path is unfamiliar. Because trust has replaced fear as your primary motivator. And trust does not require all the answers. It only requires the next step. And you are becoming comfortable with movement without complete visibility, because you now understand that clarity often follows action, not the other way around. And waiting for perfect certainty was never the requirement. Willingness was, and you are willing now in a way you were not before, because exhaustion stripped away illusions, and disappointment refined your expectations, and endurance taught you patience, and patience prepared you for responsibility. And responsibility is the gateway to stewardship, and stewardship unlocks influence. And influence expands impact, and impact multiplies fulfillment. And this progression is already in motion, even if you cannot yet see its full shape, because transformation does not announce itself with fireworks. It reveals itself through consistency, through small shifts that accumulate into undeniable change. And one day soon you will pause and realize that you respond differently than you used to. That situations that once triggered anxiety no longer have the same effect. That silence no longer feels threatening. That waiting no longer feels empty, because you are no longer afraid of stillness, since you have discovered that stillness is where alignment strengthens. And from this strengthened place, action becomes more effective because effort flows from clarity instead of confusion. And this is why what you do next will carry more weight than what you did before, because you are no longer operating from survival mode, but from intention. And intention amplifies results, because focused energy produces momentum, and momentum creates opportunity, and opportunity reveals purpose in tangible ways. And this is when life begins to feel cooperative rather than combative. Not because challenges disappear, but because you are no longer fighting yourself while facing them. And this internal alignment is what shifts external outcomes, because reality responds to coherence, and you are becoming coherent within yourself. And this coherence brings peace that does not depend on circumstances, confidence that does not require validation, and hope that does not fluctuate with outcomes. Because it is anchored, and anchored hope does not drift when waves rise. And you will encounter moments ahead where old patterns attempt to resurface, where doubt whispers familiar narratives, where fear tries to reclaim territory. But you will recognize them now, not as truth, but as echoes of a former season. And recognition itself dissolves their power, because awareness interrupts repetition, and once a pattern is seen, it can no longer operate unconsciously. And this is how cycles end, not through force, but through insight. And insight has already taken root within you. And from here forward, growth becomes less about striving and more about allowing truth to guide, allowing alignment to direct, allowing purpose to unfold, because you are no longer trying to control outcomes. You are cooperating with process, and cooperation multiplies grace, and grace accelerates progress. And progress builds confidence, and confidence fuels action. And action produces evidence, and evidence strengthens belief, and belief sustains momentum. And this cycle is now active within you, and it will carry you further than effort ever could. And one of the most profound shifts you will notice is that gratitude begins to replace anxiety. Not because everything is perfect, but because you finally see how much has already been carried for you, protected for you, prepared for you. And gratitude recalibrates perception, because what you appreciate expands, and what you resist persists. And you are learning to release resistance and cultivate appreciation. And this subtle shift changes your emotional landscape, because peace becomes accessible even in uncertainty, and joy begins to surface in ordinary moments, and presence replaces anticipation, and fulfillment replaces chasing. And this does not mean ambition fades. It means ambition becomes aligned with purpose. And purpose-driven ambition does not burn you out. It energizes you because it is fueled by meaning rather than pressure. And this energy will be noticeable to others, not because you announce it, but because it radiates quietly through how you move, how you speak, how you decide, and people will begin to respond differently to you. Not because you changed who you are, but because you stopped hiding it. And this authenticity creates resonance. And resonance attracts alignment. And alignment opens doors that force never could. And as these doors open, you will step through them with humility, not insecurity. With confidence, not arrogance. Because you know where you came from, and you know what it took to get here. And this awareness keeps you grounded even as you rise, and rising no longer feels dangerous because you are no longer afraid of visibility. Since you understand that being seen does not mean being exposed. It means being expressed, and expression is a form of freedom. And freedom allows you to live fully rather than cautiously. And this fullness is what you are always moving toward, even when the path felt unclear. And now that clarity is emerging, you will begin to trust yourself more, not because you have all the answers, but because you have learned how to listen. And listening is the gateway to wisdom, and wisdom guides choices, and choices shape destiny. And destiny is not something that happens to you. It is something you participate in, moment by moment, decision by decision, alignment by alignment, and you are participating now in a way you never have before. Consciously, intentionally present, and this participation changes everything. Because you are no longer waiting for life to begin. You are actively stepping into it. And this step marks the continuation of a journey that no longer circles the same ground, but moves forward with purpose. And what comes next will build upon what has already shifted, because this is not a peak, it is a passage, not an ending, but an opening. And the unfolding continues, deeper, wider, stronger, and more aligned than ever before, oh men.